start. So first class at OCS, what was that like?
I'll start off quickly with me arriving into Quantico, and there was snow on the ground. And I remember looking at how beautiful Virginia is, the rolling hills, the landscapes. And I tell you what, this is a common phrase in Quantico. When you drive in, you see landscape to Quantico. When you leave, you see terrain.
I love that. That's cool, man.
And I remember seeing snow on the ground, and I remember thinking, this might not have been a good idea. Again, similar to the trip around the United States and Canada, this might not have been a good idea. And if you don't think that, then you're probably not taking the risk that you need to take. I was nervous. I was in a different place in my life. And so I was curious to see how I was going to handle that.
It's interesting that, you talk about being afraid and being nervous. And I think some people maybe have an impression that, especially Marines, don't have fear. To me, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is having fear and going through with it anyway, right?
Yeah, right.
And people that don't have a little bit of fear about, for example, joining the Marine Corps right after 9/11, probably have a screw loose in some capacity, right? I mean, so the point is you have these fears, but you do it anyway, and you just kind of force yourself to do it. So was it officer candidate school first or the basic school?
Yeah, correct. It was officer candidate school. So that's 10 weeks. So 10 weeks in the winter in Virginia. And I'm not trying to make this sound glamorous or more tough than it was, but I remember breaking ice with my M16 to get through. You're going through a pond about this high and breaking your M16. And if you're from Texas, you're thinking there's no way I'm not cut out for this.
So you get through officer candidate school. Mm-hmm. And then after that, you go to the basic school?
Go to the basic US. So you roll right into the basic school. So basically, essentially the TBS is 6 months, and that's a little less boot campish.
You get out of the basic school.
The basic school, yeah.
An infantry officer at this point, right? You're a first.
No, so I was a logistics officer at that time, but joined a infantry battalion. But yeah, so a logistics officer, they sent me some training. It wasn't very long. It was probably another maybe 3 months. And then from there, straight to Camp Pendleton for about 2 weeks, and then straight to the deserts of Kuwait. And I mean, this is before anything was built up in Kuwait.
So as a logistics officer, are you in charge of a group of enlisted men, or how does it work?
Yeah, when you're a logistics officer in an infantry battalion, you actually have a significant job because nobody wants to do that stuff. But so you have a platoon just like your infantry brethren, who, I had 45 enlisted men in my platoon. And then some interesting things happened where I actually became a company commander in that infantry battalion, which probably broke some rules, but my battalion commander made it happen. And so there I was.
So I understand what an infantry officer does. How was it different, or was it different as a logistics officer?
Yeah, it is different. And again, I'm going to preface by saying my experience was very different, because if you remember, as was everybody's, this was the Wild West. This was Operation Iraqi Freedom 1. This was literally invading a country. Nobody in that battalion had ever done anything like this before.
Yeah.
So my job was, initially it was to get the battalion across the border. So everything from movements and the order of movements to, where you get supplies. So the schedule for, how you get from point A to point B. And again, when we crossed the border, it was not a super organized, movement. It was going across the desert with, vehicles getting lost. And
what's going through your mind when you land in essentially a combat? Yeah. Like, are you looking forward to it? Are you nervous? Is it mixed emotions? Like, what are you thinking about because for certain at this point, when you're in Kuwait, you are going into combat, period.
You're kind of thinking this is not really going to happen. But then it does happen. You start to see, I was one of the first ones on the ground as my battalion was on a ship coming over. The infantry battalion was. And so I was in the middle of the desert with about 15 people living in a tent. like in the middle of nowhere. So that when the battalion hits the ground, Brian, all we're doing is preparing. So everybody's cleaning weapons. I had a 9mm. I was an officer, so I would have better luck throwing that 9mm at somebody and hurting them than shooting them with it.
Yeah.
But that's the best you're going to do in that environment. And then I'll pause there, but we got the call to go across the border, and then it was real.